Great, so we'll go ahead and get started as we are at time. But actually, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our Re-imagining Virtual Internship session with Watts College of Public Service and Community Solutions, as well as Career and Professional Development Services. As we get started, I do want to let you know that we will be recording this session for those partners who are not able to join us, so we do have that available. I would also like to remind everyone, if you could stay on mute just for the presentation, but we would like to encourage you to use the chat feature throughout the presentation. So if you do have questions that come up, we will be spending some time at the end of this main session going over those as well. But I would like to go ahead and jump right in and introduce myself as well as our team that is here. And so I'm Natalie McIntyre. I'm a career and industry specialist here in Career and Professional Development Services. And I also directly liaison with Watts College. So very excited to get to engage with you all as we continue to discuss best practices and transitioning to virtual internships. But at this time, I'll go ahead and pass it off to my team to introduce themselves and get us started. So I'll go ahead and pass it to Ashley, Erica, and then Tori and Courtney as well as we begin today's session.
Hi, my name is Ashley Funneman, and I work as a project coordinator for Watts College, specifically within the Community Solutions Cooperative. And with that, I'll pass it off to Tori.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Tori. I'm a recruiting coordinator on the employer relations team with Career and Professional Development Services. Courtney, would you like to do an introduction as well?
I'll actually defer to Erica since she's ready to go.
Thanks, Courtney. Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Hodges. I'm with the Arizona State University in St. Vincent de Paul partnership. So that really is a fancy way of saying that I'm jointly funded by both. So when I'm at ASU, I actually report to the two units that are featured today, both the Watts College and then EOS, which is Educational Outreach Student Services that houses Career and Professional Development Services. And then I also report to the folks at St. Vincent de Paul. Looking forward to talking with everyone today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Courtney Walker. I'm an associate director on our employer relations team in Career and Professional Development Services. And I know shortly we'll talk specifically what our team does, but basically we lead the efforts related to employer development and helping you as an employer to recruit our students.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, everyone, for the introduction. So just to piggyback off of what Courtney was just briefly discussing. So this slide right here just talks about, as an employer relations team with Career Professional Development Services, what we can do as an ER team to help support you and your employers and your organization with recruiting at ASU, hiring the best talent for your opportunities, and different ways and strategies that we can discuss to make sure your recruiting efforts are positive and you have a great experience. So the first couple points is just engaging and strategizing with your organization, with your employers. So just kind of diving into the depths of your hiring and recruiting goals, discussing the best ways to engage with our student populations at ASU, start developing possible good fits for your future talent pipelines, and also just to kind of discuss like why you're recruiting at ASU. We also connect employers to events, so student orgs and clubs or other professional employer events that as an organization you can take part of to help build your brand on campus and with ASU students. With Handshake, we as a team review and vet all employer profiles that go into the platform. And then we also do review all jobs and internships that are submitted into Handshake too, just to make sure those experiences and those opportunities are the best opportunities for our students and they have a great and positive experience as well. With Career and Professional Development Services, we also do have an alumni recruiters team, so we can connect you with an alumni recruiter to help develop a plan to get you back on campus, whether it might be in a virtual or in-person modality, and also how to engage with current students and other alumni, so you can share your professional journey and professional advice and feedback. And then lastly, as the CPDS Career and Services, we do help assist ASU's departments and other schools with developing internship roles and programs and just supporting them in any way that we possibly can. So first, before we dive into everything, we're going to talk about our virtual internship guide. So we created this guide just to provide further guidance and resources on how an employer can transform their internship program either to a virtual, a hybrid model, or even a little bit of both, or even in person. And the way we created the guide, we set it up into stages. So we have a before, during, and after stage. So the before stage is just thinking about everything prior to that intern starting on their first official day. So such as onboarding, training, recruiting and hiring goals, making sure you have enough time to recruit and hire possible candidates for your role. Also those learning objectives, establishing those projects and those learning objectives that students can kind of get an idea about what the internship will consist of. During is just those, just making sure the supervisor's meeting regularly with that intern, whether it might be weekly, bi-weekly, making sure that they're interacting with their team members and their staff members, just making sure that they're keeping on target with their projects and making sure that they're also providing those learning objectives as well. And then the after stages are things to think about to help assist the intern once they complete the internship. So that might be the employer writing a letter of recommendation, adding them on LinkedIn, combating a list of kind of like a whole thing of portfolio for the intern so they can kind of promote what projects and what they've learned at that internship to future employers. And then lastly, the internship guide does include helpful links such as NACE, FLSA, our ASU International Student and Scholar Center. So in case you are looking to hire international students, that would be a great resource to refer to. And then also we do have a direct link to Handshake. So if you do review the internship guide and you do want to post some opportunities, we do have a direct link to that as well. So next we decided to put some data just from our undergraduates regarding internship opportunities. So the first one is 48% of our students have completed at least one internship experience during their undergraduate. So not all majors require a student to take on an internship prior to graduation, but as a university, we do try to push all of our students just to at least take one internship or accept one internship during their undergraduate career, just because it provides them professional experience, but also provides them experience in the field of interest they want to pursue. So this is just a great way for them to kind of understand where they want to go with their career, kind of what career paths they want to take. The next one, 55% of students have received credit for their experience. So this is just an important data to know as an employer that even though 55% of students actively seek to get academic credit, there is still that 45% who did not want to receive credit for their internship experience. So this is just for an important note for you to know as an employer. And then lastly, 57% of students were paid during their internship experience. So especially if you're kind of on the fence of offering paid versus unpaid, this is just an important number to note because just below 60% of students are taking on paid internship experiences. So if you want to be competitive in your industry and kind of recruit and hire the best talent for your organization, a paid internship opportunity might be the best way to go about that. So this slide right here talks about our 8 career competencies that students look for. So I'm going to let Courtney kind of explain this slide a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So we decided to include this as an idea of what you might want to build into your, as you are building your internship, maybe you're starting from the ground up. These are some really great considerations as it relates to the actual competencies that we're talking with students about. And so these competencies were really developed from the place of wanting to make sure that employers and students had a similar language when it came to interviewing specifically. So that way, you know, more than soft skills, when a student says that they're competent, let's say for instance, in teamwork and collaboration, the employer understands that that student had experience in a diversity of teamwork, and also additionally that the size of the team as well. So again, it's more than just that they had one experience with a team, it's that they had a variety of experiences with several teams. And so again, the value out of including these types of experiences where a student could get earn some of these competencies in your internship, again, it benefits the student in that way. And we know that students are actually looking for these types of experiences. And so how you choose to develop some opportunities for students in your internship to grow these competencies is what we want you to consider.
Thank you, Courtney. So the next slide, take inventory and evaluation of projects. These are some 3 great questions to think about in a lens of transforming an internship into a virtual modality. So the first question, is there a problem that needs to be solved? So just thinking about areas in your organization that you maybe kind of got pushed to the side or maybe at this time was not of utmost importance, thinking about what problems that you can do to maybe solve those problems, what best processes to implement to prevent this problem from occurring again later on. And then the next question, is there a project that needs focus and innovation? So these 2 great questions are a great way to think about how you can kind of bring on the intern and kind of embed them into this type of project, because our students bring a new kind of interesting perspective where they have innovation and they have some new fresh ideas that they can include and embed into a project and kind of also create some learning objectives behind this. So these are just, these 2 first questions are a great way to kind of think about as you transform a internship virtually, how can you kind of embed that intern into possible other projects that maybe just have been pushed to the side, you maybe just don't have the manpower to take on that project. And it's also a great way for them to kind of think about new processes and best practices to kind of implement this process later on. And then the last question, is there an area that could promote growth for your organization? So just thinking about your organization as a whole, thinking about those areas that you would like to grow or promote out and kind of build it into something bigger. This could be a great way where you can kind of embed maybe some of those virtual interns to kind of help think about how can you grow and promote this aspect out of your organization? What are those best practices? Bringing those new ideas and goals that interns may bring. So overall, they can kind of develop new projects, help you think about possible new projects in the future. So these are some 3 great questions just to think about in a lens of being a virtual internship, how you can transform those internships. So next, building an internship program. We first want to kind of just dive into why following ASU's internship guidelines are important. So I'm going to let Courtney take lead on answering this question.
So the value add of, just to piggyback off of what Tori was sharing, the value add of having an intern at your organization obviously brings a lot of benefit to your organization and the work that you do. Now, I won't lie when I say though that having an intern, hosting an intern, sometimes becomes more work for you as the employer, simply because that student is there to learn. And so as you think through the internship and the experience that you want to provide to that student, being very clear and understanding what is it also that you want them to learn in that experience, and who's going to be that supervisor of that intern, so that experience, again, would be the best learning experience for our student. The reason why it's important when we work with you and partner with you on developing your internship program is we really want the student to have a spectacular experience, because oftentimes our students, it's that they only get one shot or one chance in their in their degree program to have an internship. And a lot of the times they're actually paying for that internship experience just to receive credit. So we work with you as the employer to make sure that everything that you need and related to your organization and relation to your goals are met, while simultaneously making sure that there's learning happening for our students as well. So when you work with us as a team, we will work with you to outline some of those different pieces that Tori just talked about, to really make sure that having an intern is the right fit, or maybe it's something different that you can provide to our students in a different modality, but really doing a hard evaluation of who that supervisor that is going to be to support that student, as well as the learning objectives and that the student is going to gain. And so that's why it's very important to work with us as a team and to help you to support those internship guidelines.
Thank you, Courtney. And then the next discussion would be ASU's internship guidelines. So we have 6 guidelines that we require to be included in all internship postings that are going to be shared with students. So the 6 guidelines that we have to follow is 1, qualifications, 2, job responsibilities, 3, learning objectives, 4, supervisor title, 5 would be training, and then 6 would be internship hours and or internship duration. We did have a few questions regarding what are learning objectives. So learning objectives are the goals and or projects an intern will accomplish or learn during the duration of their internship. So in the perspective of how learning objectives differ from in-person to virtually, you would just think of all the projects that the intern will be assigned to, regardless if it's an in-person or virtual internship, all the projects that they will be assigned to doing, and then taking those projects and then incorporating what they're going to be learning from those projects. So for example, like if you wanted an intern to create like an employer guide, for example, they might be working with Handshake to kind of figure out what the process is on how to get a guide created. They might work with NACE, they might work with FLSA. So just thinking about what they're doing and what they're learning on those projects will help kind of create those learning objectives that they will kind of take away from those projects and from the internship. And then lastly, especially with goals and expectations for the internship, it's very important to set these goals and expectations early on. So that way both parties, so the supervisor and the intern, are aware and understand what projects are expected to be completed and the learning that will be achieved from completing those projects throughout the duration of the internship. Next, we're going to talk about best practices. So with technology needs, onboarding, and training, these are 3 practices that do have to be included in all internships, especially technology, onboarding, and training, because those kind of get the start of the internship, making sure the intern has everything they need, making sure they completed all the required training that they need to as a staff member, and then onboarding, just making sure that they're onboarded as a staff member, they're on all the emails, payrolls, and all those logistics. So we're going to kind of dive in first to technology needs. So as an intern, they will be using specific technologies to complete their projects and just to complete their day-to-day work. So it's important as an employer to create either audit or like a list of some sort with all the technology that the intern will need to be successful and do well and perform well during their internship. So especially if you're going to supply these technologies to the interns, it's best to kind of get this audit or this list together as soon as possible. So that way, once you get all the technology together, you can send the technology to the intern can get everything set up, making sure that they have access to everything, making sure they don't have any technical glitches prior to onboarding or prior to the officially starting. If you're unable to provide students or interns the technology at this time, it's best to be explicit and inform the intern about that as early as possible, whether it might be during the interview process or prior to onboarding, just so that way they can make sure they can get all the technology that they need prior to that first day. So that way when they come for their first official day, they're ready to go. They're about to start working on projects and they don't have to worry about like the back end and technology pieces of it. Lastly, if there are any specialized softwares that you do want the intern to use during their internship, it is best recommended that you as an employer provide that as needed. So that way they don't have any technical glitches. They don't have to worry about downloading the software specifically, and they don't have to worry about navigating it prior to starting the internship. For onboarding, that can look a lot differently in a virtual modality as compared to in-person. So we just recommend that you view your whole onboarding process in a bigger lens, kind of figure out what processes can work, what processes cannot, and then just being flexible about start dates, especially because if interns have to complete paperwork prior to getting their background check or fingerprinting, or you're waiting for them to finish background checks or fingerprinting, this can take time depending on how long it takes them to get through that process. So we always recommend the recruiter to be in constant communication with that intern, so that way they can fill out the paperwork and send it back in a timely manner, just giving the intern status of where they're at with their background check and fingerprinting, so that way they can kind of plan accordingly and discuss those next steps. And then just making sure that the staff and the team members on that team are aware of the interns joining, so making sure they're added to payroll, they're included on email listers, so that way they kind of get a proper introduction to the organization and their department, setting up introduction phone calls with the interns and their team. And also lastly, just making sure all the interns' needs are met, especially with that technology piece. This is very important, especially with their transition to this new internship, because we just want all of our students to have a positive, great experience, especially if this is their only internship prior to graduating. We want to make sure this is the best experience that they can get. Next, training. It kind of will be in a similar type of view as onboarding, kind of just viewing your training in a whole bigger lens, just figuring out what can work, what cannot, updating those practices to make sure that you can provide those required trainings to this intern, whether before onboarding or during the process of onboarding. Some employers do require training to be completed on-site just due to just regulations that they have in place. So if that is the case where the intern will have to go on-site, just please make sure you follow CDC and social distancing guidelines just to make sure that all interns and new hires are practicing social distancing. You provide them the best practices and processes regarding office rules. So if they have to wear a mask on at all times, any like hand sanitizing stations, any rules with the office, that way they can make sure that when they come on site ready to train, they have all the information that they need. And then next would be just things to additionally consider as well. So the first is planning ahead. We encourage employers to think and plan ahead as far as possible, because you would need at least 4 to 6 weeks just to get an internship program ready to go. So especially with onboarding, technology, and training, you don't want to rush those processes. So it's at least give yourself 6 weeks prior to that start date when you want those interns to start, to make sure you have everything in place. So hypothetically, if you were looking to hire interns for the August/September timeframe, and we're about in mid-June already, so this will be the time to start planning and implementing for those August/September start date interns, and just kind of reviewing everything from hiring and recruiting to onboarding to training to making sure the intern has everything they need for completing all their projects, and even the things after the internship. So you kind of have to think about the program entirely. Next, we want to talk about compensation and kind of like the paid versus unpaid internships. So as a university, we prefer if employers offered paid internships, just because besides getting those strong quality candidates that you're looking for, offering those unpaid internships, you automatically eliminate a pool of students that maybe cannot take on unpaid internships just due to financial support or just the financial instability. They just cannot take an unpaid internship on top of their school schedule and their extracurricular activities. So it's important to maybe offer those paid internships, and also students that are taking on unpaid internships, but they are still submitting it for academic credit at their university, they're still paying for that unpaid internship because they want to seek to get academic credit. So if you have to go the unpaid route, we recommend maybe just offering a stipend at the end of the internship, just because that's just a good way for the intern just to know a job well done, their efforts and their work did not go unnoticed. And it's just a great way for them just to know that their performance, they did well during the internship, they had a positive, great experience. And it's also a good way to hire and retain employees for long-term positions or full-time upon graduation. And then lastly, just creating a virtual office culture is very important, especially if your interns are going to be more in a virtual modality rather than being on site. They're going to be missing that office culture opportunity that they maybe wouldn't normally get if they had an on-site internship. So it's important to kind of offer those kind of virtual office culture events, such as setting up virtual meetings for the intern to meet with their department, their staff members, for interns across the entire organization to meet with other interns, just to know that there's more people in their type of role. You could do just for fun events where you could do like icebreakers or something fun just to kind of get teams kind of more well known with each other, or even just offering professional development events such as networking, like lunch and learn events where they can maybe meet and engage with executive level of employees or even the CEO of your organization. Because we are noticing a trend with students that if you have a great office culture and you're offering a great virtual office culture as well, some students tend to look for more of those office culture experiences rather than a better salary. So it's just great to see that it's not just a salary that students are looking for, they're looking for extra incentives, extra benefits to determine if not just a great fit, but if they want to accept that opportunity at your organization. So that concludes my part of the presentation. I'm going to pass it over to Ashley and Erica, and they would like to share some information with the employers as well.
So hi, everyone. Again, my name's Erica Hodges, and I'm here with Ashley, and we're going to talk a little bit more from, I think, our experience in working with employers, and also just being in that place right now working with St. Vincent de Paul, where we have both shifted an internship program to a virtual format and created a virtual fellowship program. So a couple of considerations. I think Courtney and Tori talked a lot about communication and how important that is. And I think we know that, right? In any normal situation where folks are in person, and it's just so important to understand how to relate to your intern, how they best hear and receive feedback, all things that are still continue to be important, but also understanding the modality piece. So something that I've talked a lot with our fellows and interns and supervisors about is those like pop in the office, open door policy kind of things that I think as supervisors we throw out there, right? To put an intern or fellow at ease, that they can come to us whenever they want with whatever questions, but that's a lot harder if they're not on site. So being really intentional about when you are creating those sort of opportunities to interface, that you keep in mind, okay, maybe for the first 2 weeks, how often do I normally have I seen my intern or interacted with them? If it's on a daily basis, every couple of hours, put 15-minute blocks in your calendar and invite them to just check in or say, hey, I'll just be on call during these 15-minute windows. You can pop in or not, that's fine. But that's where I think there's intentionality behind engagement. Certainly it needs to be personal engagement. There also needs to be more personnel involved. So kind of to what Tori mentioned in terms of the office culture, oftentimes fellows will build their professional network in this opportunity. And so it certainly will be you, but it will be other folks that influence them in their experience. And so again, inviting those people into these conversations with your fellow, you know, set up times where folks can meet with your fellow, where that intern or fellow can do like an informational interview, just things like that, that they would get probably, again, unintentionally in like a hallway conversation that you're going to have to really think through and program, and invite the fellow to think through these ideas too. You can even suggest that they come up with a suggestion of what kind of a meeting schedule would you like to see for the first 2 to 3 weeks. I think it's okay to put some of that onus on them, given that you're trying to personalize it for their own experience. In terms of safety, I couldn't agree more with what Tori mentioned in terms of adhering to CDC guidelines. I think the other reality that I talked with this group about and at St. Vincent de Paul we're being very conscious of is certainly making sure that the intern understands the safety precautions that we're taking, certainly for their own peace of mind, even though they're virtual, but also because depending on their position and their work, they may be asked by other members of the community, what's St. Vincent de Paul doing to keep their staff and guests safe? So that's almost like a default objective, right? Is that they're part of that community relations team, whereas that may not have been the case in the past. I think it's also really fair to be proactive and assign someone else as a secondary supervisor in case for some reason you do fall ill. So that the fellow doesn't have to find out the next day or, you know what I mean, 2 days later when you have your check-in meeting that you're not responding, that kind of thing. And just have that framework set up and be proactive ahead of time. Capacity, Courtney talked about this a lot when it comes to supervisors. Again, I think even now it is more important given that I would say even though we are open as a state, there are still many organizations that are thoughtfully thinking about how to slowly re-engage their workforce, whether that is in an in-person setting or a hybrid setting or continued in virtual. So really thinking about who are those essential staff that are doing the work of the organization? Do they have the capacity to manage, someone or not? But being really honest and having those conversations. I think something that I have seen, especially, in the nonprofit environment in terms of like tracking hours, there's some process in person where you log in, and enter your ID or whatever when you're on site, but how do you track that intern or fellow's hours when they're virtual. So that can just be peace of mind, right? So you as a supervisor know what's happening, and they feel like, okay, someone's monitoring me, like I, am held accountable. But also, depending on what your HR procedures are, if you're paying the student, that needs to be in place. And so we're using piloting a really simple like Google Excel, where we send the student kind of a template and they fill it out daily. And then finally, sustainability. So whether these are projects like Tori mentioned that are kind of added on to and expanding the work of the organization, or what I call back burner projects, things that you've always wanted to do but you've never had time to do, you still want to figure out what these students experienced while working on that project, but also what their recommendations are to continue the work. So I feel like that's fairly important. I've given our fellows a lot of creativity in creating almost a sustainability guide at the end of their experience. So they've been asked to reflect on their experience within that guide, whether it's like a really cool virtual Canva infographic thing, or a PowerPoint presentation, or a 2-page, bulleted paper, but talking about their experience, their recommendations, and even who they feel like could take on this work moving forward. So Ashley, anything to add or share?
No, I think you covered it all at this time. If there's any questions, we can definitely open it up. Feel free to unmute yourself or write your questions in the chat. We have about 10 minutes before we transition into our breakout rooms.
Hi, this is Bonnie Irvin. I had a question. I was curious if ASU has an official position regarding students, and if they can, if they get to choose whether or not, their comfort level with being on site or just having a virtual experience. Is that up to the student, or is it up to the placement? Thank you. Thank you for a great presentation, by the way.
So we are advocating for whatever the employer needs at this point. There is no official requirement, and I'll ask Ashley and Erica if there's anything different about this from Watts College. There's not actually any specific ASU requirement that dictates whether or not the internship is virtual or in person. Now it's up to the student to decide if they want to take advantage of either of those two options. So it's really up to the student on an ASU-wide perspective.
Mm-hmm. And then from my understanding in regards to Watts College, we recognize that some employers may have immune or compromised immune systems as well as students. So it's really up to the employer and the student as well in those situations.
Thank you.
Can I maybe add something from the employer perspective? I think it's fair to kind of coach your students around negotiating their experience. I think something that I've talked with the folks at St. Vincent de Paul a lot about is that the majority of their staff, especially the frontline staff, have been on site the entire time. And so, if you will, I don't want to say they're desensitized to the experience, but they've been living it. They know how to sanitize their hands after every different thing that they're doing, and know how to creatively take a drink of water through their mask. But I think students who have been physically distancing and staying indoors may have less of a comfort around what that looks like, operationalizing an internship during this time. And so I think really having a good understanding of, coaching some of your employers around that, but also having students ask those questions and ask for a delayed start or, something like that, I think is appropriate.
I'll just add to Erica's comment too. If you haven't considered it, I know that at ASU with specifically our student employees, they're being required to do a training. And it's a webinar type training. So when you think about hosting an intern, part of that responsibility of hosting an intern is that professional development piece. And so if you envelope this training about operating in this new space that we all currently exist in, and educating them, I think that would be a good part of their professional development as well. Courtney asked, I know of a couple of the programs at ASU that require internships for students to complete, but certainly not all. Is there any cohesive source to determine which programs have required internship credit? Courtney, at this point, there is not a centralized place. We have over 400 degree programs at ASU, so there is not a place to determine whether or not internship credit is required. Now, I will just say this, that really when you think about attracting a student and the right candidate, the onus on you as the employer is to develop a comprehensive internship program that is reflective of your capacity as an employer. It's not necessarily, it's your responsibility to encompass all of the things that every student at ASU would need to achieve internship credit. So I would say focus more on what you can do and how you can provide that internship experience, and the right student and the right internship candidate is going to find that experience based on their own interest, based on their own academic requirements. And so that's what I would say as an employer, that's what you should focus on. Good question. And again, if you have any questions, type them into the chat box, or if you want to unmute yourself, whichever you would feel most comfortable with.